the buyer comparison exercise. All right, here's how this works. So we have a document that we provide, that we go through with the seller, and it's what you can kind of see on screen right now. All right. So how this works is the stars represent desirability. And so we go through this with the seller to say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is how this works. This first column represents features and benefits of a home. And when we look at a home as a buyer, we're looking to say, okay, if I'm looking at this home versus that home, does the home have more features and benefits? Do they have the same features and benefits? Or does one home have less features and benefits than the other? That's the first thing that we look at. Features and benefits could be updates, could be location, could be amenities, et cetera, et cetera. Once we've established features and benefits, Mr. and Mrs. Client, as a buyer, the next thing that we tend to do is we say, okay, well, what is the price? And if we say, okay, let's just pretend for a second that a home that has more features and benefits and it has a higher price than the other one, is it desirable? Well, sure. If I get more, I can justify paying a little bit more. That makes sense to me as a buyer. Got it. Okay. If the features and benefits of the home that you like has more features and benefits than the other home, and it is priced the same as the other home, does the desirability go up or down? And you get the seller to say, well, obviously it'd go up. That'd be a lot better for me. I can get a better house and it's at a lower price. That's a lot better for me. That's right. So we would give that a 2-star from a desirability. And then lastly, if the property that you like has more features and benefits and it is at a lower price than the other homes it's competing with, does the desirability for the buyer go up or down? The obvious answer is it goes way, way, way up. Okay. So the seller's like, yep, Brandon, that makes a ton of sense. Okay. Now let's look at the same thing. You look at a home and the features and benefits are the same. They're about the same. Okay. If one property is significantly priced higher than the other, that property is going to end up on the expired listing list. And we didn't get into it in this video, but we always walk the seller through at the beginning of our conversation, a list of all the homes that expired and why they expired. That property is going to end up on the expired listing list. If 3 or 4 properties are roughly the same and one is significantly priced higher than the other ones, that's going to be the one that doesn't sell. That will be the property that helps the other 2 or 3 sell. However, if both properties are the same and they're priced the same, you would give that 1 star. Would that be fair? There'd be a chance you might buy that. If 2 properties are the same, but the one that you liked had a lower price, is it more desirable? And get the seller to say, yeah, that makes sense. If I'm looking at 2 homes and they're about the same features and benefits, I get about the same thing with both of them, but one's priced significantly lower, then yeah, from a buyer's perspective, of course, that's better for me. Okay, got it. So we've talked about what happens if a home has more benefits and how that price aligns when buyers are comparing homes. Lastly, let's talk about what happens if there is a home that has features and benefits that are less than the home maybe someone would be looking at. So if that home, it has less features and benefits and it has a higher price, it ends up on the expired listing list, doesn't it? Yes, it does. If the property has less features and benefits than the other home, and it is the same price, what happens? That thing ain't selling. The only way that home is going to sell is if it has less features and benefits, it has to be priced lower than its competition. You would agree with that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, yes? Yes. All of that, Brandon, makes a ton of sense. So you walk them through what we call this buyer comparison exercise, okay? I'm flying through this. Obviously, there'll be some dialogue, some questions, some back and forth. But I just want you to get the concept of this thing. You want the seller to see this visual. You really want them to grasp this idea that more features and benefits, okay, can justify a higher price. That's fine. If it's priced the same, it goes up in the eyes of a buyer. And if it's priced lower with more, well, it's the obvious choice. You want them to see that and feel that. you're going to go through this the same piece around features and benefits that has the same, and then what happens when properties have less features. Okay, now the fourth part, once they've gone through that exercise with you guys, all right, here's how you're going to go through part 4. This is the last part of the pricing presentation. Right now, you might be saying, dude, I don't do any of this. And that's why I'm going through this. This is the extent that I go through with a seller to really get these things priced correctly. Okay. All right. So then we go through and our pricing strategy is highly based on pricing against active listing competition. So most of the time, we are going to physically show the active homes on the market to our seller so that they can not only understand their competition, but they've walked through the competition. They've felt the competition. They've smelled the competition. They know everything about the competition so that we can do this active competition analysis together. All right. So this is how we go through this. This is how we help the seller arrive at the right answer. Remember I told you that at the beginning of this video? You're not just going to show up and say, here's my CMA. I think we should price it at 500. And the seller says, yep, I agree with you, Bob. I think you're right there. No. You actually have to go through it and show them, demonstrate it. Okay. So we go through this first active, 123 Main Street. It's priced at $459,000. It's been on the market for 39 days. Remember, the average in this example is 22. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is a property that's been on the market for longer than what every other home takes to sell. Okay. So the question we first have to, now that we've walked through the property, do we believe it has more features and benefits than yours, the same or less? Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller says, well, it's about the same, Brandon. I would say it's very comparable to ours. And I would say, okay, fair enough. This is the seller saying this, you guys. They're filling this in, okay? So they say it's about the same. Okay, we'll circle the same. Because it's the same, okay, we've got some choices to make just based on this property. This is not the price of your home, but conceptually from a pricing strategy, this is going to help us get to the right place so that your house becomes the obvious choice. We already talked about if both homes are the same and we list it higher than this property, we already know buyers are not willing to pay this price right now. Well, why? Well, because it's been on the market for 39 days and it hasn't sold, where every other home has sold within 22 days. So we already know $459,900 is already too high. So to list it higher would just end up on the expired list. You agree? Mr. and Mrs. Seller says, yeah, Brandon, that makes a lot of sense. They can't argue with that, okay? If we list it as the same as them, okay, potentially that might be desirable for the buyers. But what do we already know? We already know that this property that is roughly the same as yours, priced at $459,000, been on the market for almost 40 days. No one's bought it. And every other home is selling for $22,000. What do we think is happening? What do we think the buyers are saying, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, about the property 123 Main Street? Price too high. Okay, so we probably don't want to price it the same. The only thing we could do in order to stand out from this property, to have this property help us, is to do what? Yeah, I totally get it, Brandon. We probably have to, if we're going to price it to become the obvious choice, we're going to price it a little bit lower than the house. Totally agree. Yep. So if this is on active 1, so we know that we've got to be below 459.9. Is that fair? Yes, totally fair, Brandon. Okay. Again, I haven't suggested a price. The seller's going to come to their own realization in a second. Okay, watch. The seller says, okay, yep, totally agree. We got to be below 459. Okay, let's look at active number 2. Remember we walked through 321 Main Street? Yep, remember that one. Okay, they're at 439. They've been on market for about a week. Okay, now, if we look at this property, do they have more or the same or less features and benefits? Well, probably they probably have a little bit. They probably have a little bit less, actually. They probably a little bit less. Okay, yeah, fair enough. So because we're in this category, this third category of being less, remember we go back to, we've got a couple options. Can we, if they have less than us, we potentially could price higher, right? Yes, we could. And, and I'm sorry, so let's go back here. So if this property, we have more than them. We have more than them. So they're priced at $439.9, 7 days on the market. So could we price higher than them? Could we justify that? Yes, we can do that. Could we price the same as them and be the obvious choice? 100%. You get 2 stars from a desirability standpoint. If we price lower than them, we would obviously be the buyer's first choice. Mr. and Ms. Seller, would you agree? Not saying that you would want to do that, but if you were to go on the market with this home, your home clearly has more features and benefits in this home. We walk through it together. If you were to price it lower, you would be the obvious choice. We all agree. Okay, I'm not saying we should do that, but it would be they wouldn't be able to compete with us. Okay, so it's safe to assume that we could probably go on the market higher than what 321 is because we have more features and benefits. You guys agree? Yes, we totally agree. Okay, good. Let's look at the last one. 778 Main Street. They're at $479, been on the market for 17 days. How do we stack up with features and benefits? Well, that home, obviously, Brandon's the nicest one. We've got less than they do. Okay, fair. So now we're in this third category. So if we price it higher than them, yeah, Brandon, we get it. It's never going to work. Yeah. So we would end up on that expired list. If we price it at the same, nope, ain't going to work, Brandon. We can't price it the same and have less. Okay. So the only option here is to be lower than them. You guys agree? Yeah, we have to be lower than 479. Okay. So far what we have is we know we've got to be lower than 479. So that ain't going to work. We could be higher than 440. Makes total sense. We said that this property right here, if that's roughly the same, if we want to outcompete this property, we might want to be a little bit lower than them. We know that 459 ain't moving the needle. They've been on the market. They've proven that number doesn't work. So obviously you guys would agree that we probably have to be a little bit below that too, based on the price bracketing that I showed you guys. Because if we looked at that and we said, okay, most of the people in our neighborhood are looking at this price bracket of 400 to 450. Remember I showed that to you guys? And 82% of the active buyers are in this pool. Yep, Brandon, we totally remember that. Okay, great. And we know that we can be higher than 433.9. We know that. We know that we have to, when we looked at 459.9, we know that we got to be below that, right? So based on that data, the data would suggest that $450,000, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, would be a price that would cause your property to be the obvious choice, where we could use the competitors to help your property sell. Can you see that? Yes, that's so clear. And not only that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, but guess what we also get to do? If we price the property at 450, not only do we have all the people between 400 and 450, which is 82% looking at your home, we also get buyers from the next bracket up. Can I explain? Sure, of course. The people searching for homes for 450 to 500, we're also going to show up in all of their active searches as well, meaning that we have now doubled the amount of exposure by pricing directly at 450, not 449.9, not 459.9, but directly at 450 allows us to double the amount of exposure on your property, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. So this is how we're going to help your property stand out from the crowd. Does all of that make sense? And again, I walked this through with you guys in just a few minutes. This is a high level understanding of what a pricing strategy should include, so that A, you show up as the expert, B, you become the obvious choice, and then most importantly, what I told you at the beginning of this video, so that you get the seller's homes sold. That is what you're trying to do, yes, as a listing agent. To go through all of the headache and all of the work to get a listing for it not to sell is probably one of the worst feelings you can have as a real estate agent. Add this stuff to what you're already doing, and it's only going to help you price property correctly, help stand out from all of the agents that you're competing with, and help you to win more business.